98.9, Centre, 97.3, Est-Ouest, 91.7. RM1, it's 9 o'clock. The news with Pranav Beeharry. Good morning, Pranav.
Good morning, Sophie. Authorities aim to replace coal with LNG after 9 years of delay. This project was at the heart of discussions during Energy Minister's recent visit to India. At 29, ASP Suhail Lidyalam takes charge of the Police Press and Public Relations Office. He's focusing on digital communication and dialogue with journalists to ensure transparency and closer ties with the public. Mauritius still relies on imports for its onions. Local seasonal production covers only 30% of national consumption. The legendary McLaren F1 arrives in Mauritius. It will soon join the collection at the Milestones Motor Museum, scheduled to open in 2026. In international news, Donald Trump says TV networks against him should maybe lose license after Jimmy Kimmel's suspension. Authorities are banking on LNG, liquefied natural gas, to gradually replace coal. This emerged from Energy Minister Patrick Assiavaden's recent visit with the Prime Minister to India, where discussions also focused on setting up the country's first floating solar photovoltaic project at Tamarind Falls. Work on the project has already begun. It is worth recalling that back in 2016, the consulting firm Mott and MacDonald had confirmed the feasibility of an LNG-based project in Mauritius. But despite several million rupees spent on consultancy, the reports gathered dust for 9 years. The ministry says it was due to a lack of political will. Ashibachu.
Back in 2016, the consultancy firm Mott and MacDonald confirmed the feasibility of an LNG-based project in Mauritius. But that report has remained in the drawers for 9 years due to a lack of political will. Mauritius, it is worth recalling, has set the target of reaching a 60% renewable energy by 2035. The strategy relies on two main pillars: increasing the share of green energy and phasing out coal. In this transition, LNG emerges as a credible alternative. This natural gas, cooled to very low temperatures for transport and storage in liquid form, is regasified before being used in power plants. Its combustion generates far fewer emissions than coal and heavy fuel oil. In India, Minister Patrick Assiavaden opened discussions with his counterpart on a memorandum of understanding covering 3 strategic areas: floating solar, LNG and domestic solar, a cooperation that could finally speed up the phase-out of coal and diversify Mauritius' energy mix in a sustainable way.
Ashibachu. At just 29 years old, Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Police Suhail Lidyalam has taken charge of the Police Press and Public Relations Office. Officially appointed on September 15, the policeman aims to modernize police communication by focusing on digital platforms and social media, ensuring information that is fast and accessible. Speaking to our journalist Nirma Narayan Reddy, he also stressed the importance of strengthening dialogue with journalists to guarantee transparency and closer ties with the public. In other news, a staple ingredient in Mauritian cuisine, onions are still produced in limited quantities locally, around 2,000 tons this year, covering only about 30% of national consumption. Annual demand is estimated at 12,000 tons, and local cultivation remains seasonal, with harvesting mainly from September to December. Beyond this period, especially from January onwards, local stocks are usually depleted and the country must rely entirely on imports to meet demand. At the Agricultural Marketing Board, Assistant General Manager Bani Ramcharan tells us that each year, around 12,000 tons of imported onions fill the gap and supply the local market. As we reported yesterday morning in a video, Eco-Austral journalist John Williamson, a Frenchman who has lived in Mauritius for 25 years, called Mauritian Creole pathetic and described our culture as uninteresting. He made these remarks as a guest on the podcast Ligne Droite, comments that sparked reactions from many Mauritians since yesterday. However, after seeing the report broadcast yesterday morning on RM1, John Williamson contacted us to apologize to the Mauritian public, both by email and through a voice statement. He acknowledged that the term he used to describe the Creole language could have offended some people and clarified that it was not his intention. In education, according to a statement from the Early Childhood Care and Education Authority, enrollment in public pre-primary schools began on Monday, September 15. Parents whose children will turn 3 before the end of this year have until September 30 to register at the nearest public school from 9:30 a.m. to noon and from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. They must bring the original and a copy of their ID, their child's birth certificate and proof of address. Places will be allocated based on proximity to the child's home, and if unavailable, another school will be offered. The authority stresses that after the September 30 deadline, no place is guaranteed. Following a United Nations Independent Commission report accusing Israel of genocide, Résistance et Alternative is calling on the government to act swiftly and officially ratify the Genocide Convention, which Mauritius adopted in 2019. The party also urges the application of this convention to punish those responsible for such crimes. REA spokesperson Stéphane Gua is calling for the severing of diplomatic and trade ties with Israel and the removal of the visa requirement for Palestinians wishing to travel to Mauritius. Good news for car enthusiasts in Mauritius. The McLaren F1, known as one of the greatest sports cars of all time, landed this in Mauritius yesterday at the SSR International Airport. It will soon join a collection of more than 200 cars that will be showcased at the Milestones Motor Museum, a museum that will retrace the history of the automobile worldwide, from the Bugatti Type 35 to Ferrari, from Lamborghini to the legendary Volkswagen Beetle, not forgetting icons such as the Muris and the Mini. The opening of the museum is scheduled for 2026. Wayne Harley, the museum's curator, tells us more about this McLaren F1. He's speaking to Shelley Nirban.
The Motor Museum will be exhibiting motor cars from the early turn of the century, from the famous Model T right up to the McLaren F1. The McLaren F1, arguably the greatest normally aspirated motor car that reached a speed of 385 kilometers an hour, made 600 brake horsepower, and it was a car that was built in the 1990s and to this day is still regarded as one of the fastest supercars ever. It's a milestone is that 64 road-going cars, 106 of them in total, which included the GTR Le Mans motor car, and to be having that on the island is truly remarkable.
Time for sports news. Football. FC Barcelona claimed victory yesterday away at Newcastle in the opening round of the Champions League. A brace from Marcus Rashford gave the Spaniards a 2-1 win. Manchester City, for their part, defeated Italian champions FC Napoli 2-0 with goals from the Norwegian cyborg Erling Haaland and Belgian winger Jeremy Doku. And Club Brugge handed AS Monaco a heavy defeat 4-1. In international news, US President Donald Trump has suggested some TV networks should have their licenses taken away as he backed America's broadcast regulator in a row with the suspension of ABC host Jimmy Kimmel. The Disney-owned network announced on Wednesday evening it was pulling the comedian off air indefinitely amid a backlash over his remarks about the murder of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk last week. On Monday, Kimmel appeared to suggest the suspect was a MAGA Republican, although authorities in Utah had said the alleged gunman was indoctrinated with leftist ideology. ABC took Jimmy Kimmel live off air after the Federal Communications Commission threatened action over his remarks. 9 hours past 9 minutes. That's all the news for now. Thank you for tuning in.